The Navy SEAL training gym buzzed with energy that morning. The sound of heavy weights hitting the floor, trainers shouting orders, and young soldiers grunting through push-ups filled the air. The bright lights reflected off the polished gym floor, shining like a mirror. Among the strong, proud, and loud young men, a quiet figure moved slowly in the corner, pushing a mop, dragging a bucket of water behind him. No one noticed him. He was just the janitor. Gray hair, wrinkled hands, and a faded red jumpsuit. His name tag simply read, Harris. He didn't talk much. He didn't interrupt. Every morning he came early, cleaned every inch of the gym, and left without a word. The young soldiers joked about him all the time. "Hey, Grandpa, don't slip on your mop," one shouted. Another laughed. "I bet he's been mopping floors since World War II. Harris never replied. He just gave a faint smile and kept cleaning. But there was something different about him. Something no one could quite explain. His movements were calm, controlled, almost too precise for an ordinary janitor. He handled the mop like it was part of him. His posture always straight, his eyes always alert. That morning, a new man entered the gym, Commander Jack Reynolds. Recently transferred from a special operations unit, known for his sharp discipline and cold precision. His presence filled the room like thunder. "Good morning, gentlemen," he barked. The soldiers stood straighter instantly. As Reynolds scanned the gym, his eyes locked on the janitor in the corner. Something about the man seemed familiar. The way he stood, the shape of his shoulders, the silent confidence. For a moment, the commander frowned. He couldn't place it. Maybe it was nothing. "All right, back to training," he ordered. The soldiers went back to work, running, lifting, shouting. Harris quietly moved between them, mopping up the sweat, sweeping the dust. Then it happened. As Harris bent down to clean near the pull-up bars, the collar of his red uniform slipped slightly, revealing a faded tattoo on the left side of his neck. The commander's eyes froze. That mark. It wasn't an ordinary tattoo. It was a small black trident with wings, the kind used decades ago by a classified SEAL unit. Only a handful of men had it, and most of them were long gone. Commander Reynolds took a few slow steps forward, his expression tightening. The young soldier next to him noticed and whispered, "Something wrong, sir?" Reynolds didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the old man. Harris straightened up, sensing someone watching him. Their eyes met for the first time. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, respect, and maybe even a bit of history. But Harris quickly looked away and went back to work. The commander stood silently, trying to shake off the feeling. It couldn't be him, he thought. That man disappeared years ago. No record. No trace. Later that afternoon, the soldiers gathered around the bench press area, laughing loudly. One of them, a tall, cocky recruit named Miller, dropped his towel on the floor near Harris. "Hey, old man," Miller called out, smirking. "Pick that up for me, will you?" The others laughed. Harris looked at him calmly, then bent down and picked it up. He didn't say a word. "Come on, Grandpa, you're slow." "Move like a real man," another shouted. The room filled with laughter again. Commander Reynolds watched from across the gym. His jaw tightened. He wanted to step in, but something made him stop. He wanted to see how Harris would react. Harris didn't react at all. He finished mopping, then walked past them without even looking angry or sad, just peaceful. As he passed the commander, Reynolds noticed something else. Harris's hands. They weren't the hands of a janitor. They were scarred, old wounds still visible, the kind soldiers carried from real battles. That night, Reynolds couldn't sleep. He sat in his small office, the image of that tattoo flashing in his mind. He opened an old database on his laptop, searching through old SEAL team archives. There it was, a record of a classified unit from 25 years ago, call sign Triton 6. All members listed as deceased in action. One name, however, had a question mark beside it, Master Chief William Harris. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, his heartbeat slowed. It couldn't be coincidence. The next morning, the commander arrived early, before anyone else. He found Harris already there, mopping the same floor, humming quietly to himself. Reynolds walked up to him. "You're here early, Mr. Harris." The janitor looked up, smiling. "Old habits, sir. Can't rest much these days." "Old habits," the commander repeated softly. "From where exactly?" Harris paused for a second, his eyes calm but deep. "From a long time ago, Commander. A time better left behind." Reynolds studied him carefully. The silence between them grew heavy. "You were in the teams, weren't you?" Harris stopped mopping. He looked at Reynolds, and for the first time, his eyes showed something. Pain, pride, and a story too heavy to tell. I was, he said quietly, but that was another life. Reynolds didn't know what to say. The old man returned to cleaning, his motions steady and slow. Later that day, the commander gathered his men for drills. As he shouted commands, he couldn't help but notice how Harris's movements matched the rhythm of the training. Every step, every sound, in perfect sync. Something inside Reynolds stirred. Respect, curiosity, and maybe even guilt for letting the soldiers mock him. As the day ended, Harris finished his work, wrung out his mop, and walked toward the exit. The sunset light fell across his neck again, and that tattoo glowed faintly in the golden light, like a medal he never wore. Reynolds watched him leave. He didn't stop him this time. But he knew one thing for sure. The quiet janitor who cleaned his gym was not an ordinary man. He was someone who had once carried the weight of the nation on his shoulders, and now carried only a mop. And for the first time, Commander Reynolds couldn't wait for the next day, because he needed to know who Mr. Harris truly was. The next morning, the gym was alive again. The sound of metal weights clanging, men shouting, and sneakers squeaking on the floor. But something was different. This time, everyone was whispering about the janitor. The rumor had spread fast. Someone had seen the commander talking to Harris early in the morning. Others said the commander looked shocked, like he'd seen a ghost. Why would the commander talk to him? Miller whispered to his friend. He's just a janitor. His friend shrugged. Maybe he's some kind of spy or something. They both laughed, but the sound was nervous, not funny. As Harris walked past them, pushing his mop, the whispers followed him like shadows. He didn't look up. He didn't speak. His face stayed calm, but deep inside, he knew people were watching now. Commander Reynolds entered the gym a few minutes later. His sharp eyes scanned the room, noticing the sudden hush in the air. The men straightened their backs, pretending to train harder. He could feel it. Something had changed. The janitor, who had once been invisible, was now the center of quiet attention. Reynolds watched as Harris worked quietly near the far wall, cleaning the mirror with slow, steady motions. That same discipline was there again. The way he moved, the way he kept rhythm without losing focus. It was the behavior of a man trained to perfection. Reynolds turned to his assistant, Sergeant Cole. Cole, how long has that janitor been working here? Cole looked surprised. Sir, I'm not sure. He's been around since before I got here. Nobody really pays him much mind. Who hired him? Cole frowned. Base management, I think. Why, sir? Reynolds didn't answer. He was lost in thought again. That night, long after the soldiers left, the gym was quiet. Only the hum of ceiling lights remained. Harris was still there, sweeping the last bits of dust. He hummed softly, a low old Navy song, the kind sung by men who'd been far from home for too long. Reynolds walked in silently, his boots echoing across the empty floor. You work late, he said. Harris didn't look up. The floor's always cleaner when no one's around, sir. Reynolds folded his arms. You don't have to call me sir. I'm not your commander. Harris smiled faintly. Old habits again. Reynolds stepped closer. The tattoo was visible again. That same trident with wings. The sight made his chest tighten. You were part of Triton 6, weren't you? He asked quietly. Harris paused, his mop still in his hands. For a moment he didn't move. Then he sighed, slow and deep. That name's not supposed to exist anymore, he said softly. Reynolds' eyes widened. So it's true. Harris shook his head. It doesn't matter now. Those men, they're gone. I just clean floors. Reynolds' voice dropped. You were one of the best, weren't you? Harris looked at him for a long moment. His eyes were steady, calm, but filled with something heavy. I was one of the lucky ones, he said. That's all. The next morning, the whispers grew louder. Some soldiers had overheard fragments of that conversation. Commander said something about Triton 6, one whispered. What's that? Another asked. Some secret SEAL unit from years ago. Classified stuff. I read about them online. They disappeared. By noon, the gym was full of half-truths and rumors. Some believed Harris was a war hero. Others thought he'd done something terrible. But the mocking didn't stop. Miller, the cocky recruit, couldn't resist another jab. He shouted across the gym, Hey, old man! You clean floors, or are you here to spy on us? A few soldiers laughed. This time, Harris looked up. His eyes met Miller. Commander Reynolds, who had entered just in time to witness it, decided to speak. Miller, his voice thundered. You think you're funny? The young soldier snapped to attention. No, sir! Reynolds walked over slowly, his boots heavy on the floor. He stood beside Harris and said, Do you know who this man is? Miller stammered. A janitor, sir. Reynolds' voice was cold. You're wrong. The gym fell silent. Every head turned. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade away. "This man," Reynolds said slowly, "served this country long before you were born. He's done things you couldn't even imagine. So before you ever call him old man again, think about what kind of boots you're trying to fill." Miller's face went pale. He nodded, eyes down. Harris looked uncomfortable. "Commander, please," he said quietly. "There's no need." Reynolds shook his head. "There's every need. Respect should be earned, but it should also be given." Harris gave a small nod and went back to cleaning. But inside, something had changed. The soldiers now watched him with curiosity, not mockery. That evening, as the commander prepared to leave the base, he noticed something odd. Outside his office door lay a small envelope, old and yellowed. Inside was a single photograph. 7 men standing in front of a Navy chopper, their faces young, strong, and proud. In the back row stood a man with sharp eyes and a familiar trident tattoo on his neck. The name scribbled on the back, Triton 6, Operation Deep Tide, 1998. Commander Reynolds sat down slowly, staring at the photo. One of those men was William Harris, and below the list of names was a note written in faded ink. "For those who never came back, and the one who chose silence." Reynolds clenched the photo in his hand. The truth was right there. Harris wasn't just a janitor. He was a ghost from a forgotten war, a man who had survived when no one else did. The next morning, Harris arrived at the gym as usual. The air felt different. The young soldiers didn't laugh this time. They greeted him with quiet nods. A few even helped him move equipment aside to clean. Harris noticed, but he didn't say a word. He simply smiled and continued working. From across the gym, Commander Reynolds watched silently. He finally understood something. The old man didn't stay to be remembered. He stayed because he couldn't forget. As the day ended, Reynolds whispered to himself, "Every scar has a story, and it still isn't finished." The gym was silent that night. The lights were dim, only a few ceiling lamps still glowing. Outside, rain hit the windows softly, and thunder rolled far away. Commander Reynolds sat in his office, staring at the old photograph again. The one with 7 men and the words Triton 6 written on the back. He had looked at it for hours. Each face told a story of courage and brotherhood, except one. The man in the back, the one with the trident tattoo on his neck, now mopped floors in his gym. Reynolds' mind raced. Why would a man like that hide? What happened to his team? And more importantly, what was he still doing here? The commander finally stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked out into the hall. His boots echoed against the floor as he made his way toward the gym. Inside, Harris was still there, as always, quietly finishing his cleaning, his mop swaying side to side like a slow rhythm. Reynolds stopped at the door and watched for a few seconds before speaking. "You don't sleep much, do you?" Harris didn't look up. "Old habits, sir. Quiet nights are easier than quiet thoughts." Reynolds stepped closer. "You knew I'd come, didn't you?" Harris chuckled softly. "Commanders are predictable creatures. Curiosity is your weakness." Reynolds folded his arms. "And yours?" Harris paused his mopping. "Survival," he said simply. The commander's voice lowered. "You were in Triton 6. I know it now. You were part of that mission, the one the government erased." Harris finally looked up, his eyes calm but tired. "And what difference does it make, Commander? That was a lifetime ago." Reynolds took a slow breath. "Maybe for you, but not for the men who still wear that patch, or for the truth that never came out." Harris placed the mop against the wall and leaned on it. The silence between them was heavy, filled with something unspoken. "You want the truth?" Harris asked quietly. "You think you can handle it?" Reynolds nodded once. Harris walked toward the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. "We were 7, he began. 7 men sent to a place that didn't exist on any map. We had orders, clear as day, but something went wrong. Something they never told you about." Reynolds listened carefully, his heartbeat slow but strong. "They left us there," Harris continued. "Command cut the line. We were supposed to extract a hostage, but when things got messy, they decided we were expendable." The commander frowned. "Expendable? That's impossible. The SEALs don't abandon their own." Harris's eyes hardened. "Don't they? You think every mission ends with a flag and a ceremony?" "Some end in silence, Commander." Silence and fire. Reynolds didn't move. The air felt heavy, like the whole room was holding its breath. "What happened after?" he asked. Harris turned, his voice low. "We fought for 3 days. No backup, no supplies. One by one, my brothers fell. I buried them with my own hands." He paused, his eyes distant. "When I finally made it out, I was half dead. The Navy called it a lost operation. They listed us as killed in action. And I let them. Why? Reynolds whispered. Harris gave a small, tired smile. Because some ghosts deserve to stay dead. Reynolds leaned forward. But you came back. You're still here. Not as a soldier, Harris said. Not anymore. I've done things I can't explain, Commander. Things that don't fit inside medals and flags. The room went quiet again. The sound of rain filled the silence between them. Reynolds finally spoke. You could have gone anywhere. Why here? Why this base? Harris looked down at his hands. Because this place reminds me of what I lost. And what I still have left. Reynolds frowned. What do you mean? Harris took a deep breath. One of my men, my second in command, didn't die that day. He was captured. I never found his body, and rumor says he might still be alive. Reynolds froze. Alive after all these years? Harris nodded slowly. That's what I came here to find out. The commander's heart pounded in his chest. Does the Navy know? They don't want to know, Harris said flatly. Some truths are too dirty for reports. They'd rather keep the past buried. Reynolds' voice hardened. Then we dig it up ourselves. Harris studied him for a moment. You'd risk your career for a ghost story? I'd risk it for a man who never stopped serving, even when everyone forgot his name, Reynolds said firmly. For the first time, Harris smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. You remind me of someone I used to know. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the far end of the gym. Reynolds' hand went straight to his holster. Harris didn't move. His instincts were faster, sharper. He turned toward the noise, scanning the shadows. A locker door swung open slowly, then stopped. Reynolds lowered his gun slightly. Probably the wind, he muttered. Harris shook his head. Wind doesn't move steel like that. They approached carefully, boots silent against the floor. Harris reached first, pulling the locker open. Inside, there was nothing, just a folded piece of paper taped to the back wall. Reynolds took it out. The paper was old, stained, and barely legible. On it, a single phrase was scrawled in rough handwriting. They're watching. The commander looked up sharply. What is this? Harris's expression changed. Calm replaced by something cold and focused. It means we're not alone. Before Reynolds could respond, the gym lights flickered once, then again. Darkness swallowed the room. A second later, the emergency lights came on. Dim and red. Harris's voice was calm, but firm. Someone doesn't want this truth to come out. Reynolds looked around, trying to steady his breath. Who? Harris stared at the open locker. The same people who buried Triton 6. The tension in the air was electric. The commander finally understood. This wasn't just about an old man's past. It was about a secret still alive, one that could destroy careers, reputations, maybe even lives. Harris picked up his mop again, gripping it like a weapon. You should go home, Commander. Forget what you saw. Reynolds shook his head. Not a chance. The old man's voice dropped to a whisper. Then be ready, sir. Because once the past wakes up, it doesn't go back to sleep. And with that, Harris turned away, his shadow stretching long across the gym floor. The shadow of a man who had seen too much, survived too long, and now carried a secret that refused to die. Outside, thunder cracked once more, echoing like a warning across the base, and for the first time, Commander Reynolds realized this was no ordinary janitor. This was a man still fighting a war no one knew about the next morning. The storm had passed, but the air around the base still felt heavy. Commander Reynolds walked into the gym early. The floor was shining, the weights lined up perfectly, and Harris was already there, sitting quietly on a bench, staring at the same locker from last night. Reynolds approached him slowly. Couldn't sleep? Harris shook his head. Sleep doesn't come easy when ghosts start talking again. Reynolds handed him the old note they found. They're watching. I checked the security footage, he said. Someone erased the last hour of last night's recording. Someone erased the last hour of last night's recording. Harris nodded calmly, as if he already knew. They're cleaning up their trail. Same as before, Reynolds frowned. Then why are you still here, Harris? Why keep coming back to this place? The old man took a deep breath. Because I made a promise. He looked up, his eyes distant but sharp. Before my team went in, my second in command, Jackson, told me, if one of us survives, don't let them forget we existed. Harris paused. I couldn't save him, but I can still keep his promise. Reynolds understood now. The mop, the silence, the routine. It wasn't about cleaning floors. It was about remembering. You could have gone to the press, Harris, Reynolds said. You could have told the world, Harris smiled faintly. The world doesn't care about old soldiers, Commander, but young ones do. Every time I see them here, training, fighting, trying, I see my brothers again. That's enough. Suddenly the gym door opened. A young soldier, Miller, the same one who had once mocked Harris, walked in nervously. "Sir." "Commander," he said. I looked up that tattoo online. It's real. It's a seal mark, old, restricted. I didn't know who he was." Reynolds nodded. "Now you do, son." Miller looked at Harris and straightened his posture. Then, in a voice firm with respect, he said, "Sir, permission to shake your hand?" Harris stood slowly. His old scarred hand met the young man's. "Respect isn't given by orders," Harris said softly. "It's earned by how you live." The commander stepped forward, his voice clear and strong. "Attention!" Every soldier in the gym stood tall. Harris froze for a moment. No one had saluted him in decades. Reynolds raised his hand to his forehead. "For the one who never left his post," he said. The soldiers followed, their salute crisp, proud, and silent. Harris blinked back the tears that had waited years to fall. As he turned to leave, the morning sun broke through the gym windows, landing on his neck, lighting up the faded tattoo one last time. It gleamed like a medal he never asked for, and a promise finally kept. The end. The end.